Dear friends of IAEE and dear participants in the 17th World Conference on Earthquake Engineering, I wish to express my sincere welcome to the new IAEE initiative named Meet the Masters. This initiative is in line with IAEE's effort to promote diversity in the research and practice of earthquake engineering and earthquake disaster mitigation. Here we try to connect legendary figures who have made outstanding contributions to the advancement of earthquake engineering with those who belong to the younger generations and will lead our disciplines now in the future. Meet the Masters are the video lectures featured with legendary figures in which we can listen most vividly to how they worked in various places and interact with other people to lead their research and practice. This video lecture features Professor Tsuneo Katayama of the University of Tokyo in Japan. First, a close colleague of Professor Katayama, Dr. Ryuji Soyama, will introduce Professor Katayama and give us a brief history of his major accomplishments. The introduction will be followed by Professor Katayama's unique video lecture, which he kindly prepared for this special occasion.
Dear distinguished guests and audiences worldwide,
you are most welcome to the Meet the Masters program. IAEE has set up the program on the 17th World Conference on Earthquake Engineering. Among the four great masters scheduled to appear in this program, this lecture is featured with Professor Tsuneo Katayama, Professor Emeritus at the University of Tokyo. My name is Ryuji Soyama. I'm working for a consulting firm in Tokyo. I was one of the earliest students of Professor Katayama. Today, I feel very honored to be here and to take this role of introducing Professor Katayama before his lecture as a great master. Professor Katayama was born in Tokyo, Japan in 1939. He graduated from the Department of Civil Engineering of the University of Tokyo in 1962 and master's degree in 1964. He then moved to Australia and began his graduate study at the University of New South Wales. Around that period, it was rather rare for a Japanese student to go alone to study in university outside Japan. He studied hard naturally, but at the same time he enjoyed different life and culture very much. He received his PhD there in 1967 with earthquake engineering as his major. He then returned to Japan and joined as an assistant professor at Chiyo University, a large private university in Tokyo. Then he moved to the University of Tokyo as an associate professor and was promoted to a full professor. Throughout his academic career, he was engaged in earthquake engineering. Particularly, his research was characterized by pioneering work on lifeline earthquake engineering. He developed seismic design and assessment methods for water and gas supply systems when subjected to earthquakes. He further extended his research to economic and social aspects of earthquake disasters, which should contribute to the development of policies and planning related to earthquake disaster mitigation. In 1996, 1 year after the 1995 Kobe earthquake, Professor Katayama was invited to join the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention, dubbed NEED, as its Director General. In response to the very severe disaster disclosed in the Kobe earthquake, NEED has launched many new huge projects. One notable project was developing a full-scale huge shaking table facility commonly dubbed E-Defense to quantify the collapse of built structures and to develop new design methods to prevent the collapse. Another was the establishment of high-density seismograph networks called KNet and KICnet. In the network, more than 1,700 seismographs have been deployed throughout Japan, and ground shaking have been recorded continually. Such recorded data form the basis for the characterization of strong ground motion to be stipulated in seismic design. Professor Katayama has also contributed a great deal to the steady growth of IAEE. For many years, he was a central member of the IAEE's executive committee, which is responsible for important decisions on the IAEE's operation. In the committee, he served as the Secretary General for 14 years, from 1988 to 2002, and then served as a president between 2006 and 2010. With this much of a summary about his professional career, it is a pleasure to introduce Professor Katayama to the podium for his master's lecture.
Good day, dear friends, and thank you, Dr. Isayama, for your kind introduction of me. I'm honored to be selected as one of the masters of earthquake engineering. I was born in Tokyo in 1939. Movie lovers may know it was the year when Gone with the Wind was released. I received my bachelor's degree in 1962 and master's degree in 1964, both from the University of Turkey. In those days, I didn't know that there is an academic gathering called the World Conference on Earthquake Engineering. Having obtained a master's degree, I went to Sydney, Australia, one of the farthest countries from Japan. Many people have asked me, why Australia? I'm going to make a long story short. I responded to the offer for the position of teaching fellow at the Civil Engineering School of the University of New South Wales. So, when the Third World Conference was held in New Zealand in early 1965, that is 56 years ago, I was in Sydney studying for a PhD degree at the University of New South Wales. From Sydney to New Zealand was only 4 hours flight. Also, a close friend from New Zealand happened to get married just before the Third World Conference. These circumstances made me visit New Zealand and participate in the Third World Conference. Although I wrote my PhD thesis about the dynamics of tall buildings, I did not pay much attention to the earthquake engineering aspect of the problem. The trip to New Zealand, however, had a great influence on my following research life. During the conference, I met several well-known professors whom I had only known by their names. Meeting such professors like George Hausner and Donald Hudson, both professors of Caltech, that is California Institute of Technology, and Joseph Penzine, University of California, Berkeley, made me think that earthquake engineering would be my lifetime field of work. This is the 11th time I attend World Conference. It may be of some interest for the younger people to know the early days of the World Conference. The prehistory of World Conference dates back to 1952, when the Symposium on Earthquake and Blast Effects on Structures was held at the University of California, Los Angeles. It was not titled the First World Conference on Earthquake Engineering. The organizers were concerned that a conference specialized only for earthquake engineering could continue in a series. The 1952 symposium was followed by a conference, this time devoted only to earthquake engineering. It was held in Berkeley, California in 1956 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. World was given to the title of the conference because there were foreign participants invited to attend. It was a modest meeting with 140 participants and 40 papers. In the preface of the proceedings of the first conference, Professor Hausner pointed out two purposes of the conference. One was the importance of observing the 50th anniversary year of the destructive San Francisco earthquake of 1906. He also said that the scientists and engineers from major seismic areas of the world should be brought together to pool their knowledge of earthquakes and developments in earthquake-resistant design and construction for the benefit of all mankind. I came back from Sydney in 1967, and I was lucky that I could start teaching as an assistant professor at Tsuneo University, a private university in Tokyo. Since it was the first time that I gave formal lectures in the university, it took me a great deal of time for their preparation. Then I slowly started research on the engineering properties of strong ground motion using earthquake records obtained in Japan. But what I did in those days was mainly writing papers by piece selling the PhD dissertation I wrote in Sydney. I was offered a position of associate professor at the Institute of Industrial Science of the University of Tokyo in October 1971, and later promoted to professor. I stayed there for almost 25 years. Hence, most of my research was performed during this period. My earlier research was influenced by the works of two U.S. researchers. They are Professors Hausner and Hudson, who are actively engaged in the research on the engineering property of strong ground motion. In my early 30s, I became interested in the decay of the earthquake response spectrum with distance. The results of such a study were reflected in the structural period-dependent hazard map of Japan. I think the concept of the research was reasonable, but the quantitative aspect was dubious because of the small number of strong ground motion records available at that time. Now, let me talk about several prominent persons who have influenced my subsequent academic life. I nostalgically remember four names. They are George Hausner, Kiyoshi Kanai, Bill Iwan, and Harish Shah. Hausner organized the first conference in 1956. He is also known to have thought up the idea of earthquake response spectrum to represent the engineering property of strong ground motion. For a young researcher, Professor Hausner was almost like a god. I was lucky that I became acquainted with him when he still was an active leader in the world of earthquake engineering research. Professor Hausner and I worked together in several international meetings, but one particular occasion vividly remains in my memory. When the 9th World Conference was held in Japan in 1988, I was designated as Secretary General of the International Association for Earthquake Engineering, IAEE. I asked Professor Hausner to be the chairman of a certain committee and arranged its meeting to be held in Tokyo in October 1991. Here is an unforgettable memory about Professor Hausner. On the first day of the meeting, this chairman didn't appear. Later, Bill Ivan told me in a low voice that Hausner found out at the airport that he had left his passport at home. Although I attended Professor Kanai's lecture as a student, I had not been acquainted personally with him until the Third World Conference held in New Zealand in 1965. I came back to Japan in 1967 after about 3 years' stay in Sydney. I called Professor Kanai at the Earthquake Research Institute of the University of Tokyo. It was rather an impudent visit, but he kindly accepted me and even thanked me for a small help I made in New Zealand for the Japanese delegation. Since then, he introduced me to many earthquake engineering researchers in Japan. It was great support for a junior researcher like me to start up academic life. There is an episode which I will never forget. It was during the 6th conference held in New Delhi in 1977. One evening, when we were having drinks, the news came informing us that Kanai won the Asahi Prize, a very prestigious prize given by the Asahi newspaper company. I pulled Kanai's hands and we started to dance. But the floor manager rushed on us and told us harshly that man-to-man dancing is strictly prohibited. Bill Ivan was a professor emeritus of Caltech. It is very sad that I have to say this in the past tense. Bill passed away on October 29 last year. He was 85 years old, 4 years senior to me. He was something like a mentor as well as a good friend to me. I met him for the first time during the conference trip to the Taj Mahal at the 1977 World Conference. We exchanged a very short conversation then. He told me jokingly that he had never met a Japanese without carrying a camera. Later, I learned he was a camera-happy person. In 2015, I hovered between life and death and was hospitalized for a total of 4 months from mid-June to mid-October. Bill sent me a letter of encouragement. It was dated July 22, 2015, when I still was in the hospital. The letter said,
Dear Tsuneo, I heard that you may be experiencing some health issues, and I wanted to write to you with some words of encouragement. As you no doubt know, I went through a long list of treatments for stage 4 terminal cancer that had affected my brain, lungs, and liver. I can thank the Lord that these treatments are now over and I am doing fine. So I know what I am saying when I tell you to hang in there, no matter how bad the diagnosis may be. There is always hope. I'm sure you have excellent doctors in Japan, and I know an added spiritual element would also be helpful. I trusted my life to Jesus Christ many years ago, and He has never failed me. You are a strong person, and I know you are a fighter. I am confident that you will be successful in your battle with any illness you may face. I wish you all the best in your efforts, and please let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you in any way. Sincerely, Bill. I will be praying for you.
Harish Shah is a professor at Stanford University. He is 2 years older than me. Harish and I have been good friends since 1980. When I first visited Stanford University, he took the trouble to come to meet me at the airport, although I was a stranger to him. Since then, however, we have worked together in many instances. We probably organized more than a dozen international meetings at many places in the world. When I visited Stanford, I used to stay at his home, and when he came to Japan, which was quite often, we enjoyed hot curry in an Indian restaurant. Some of you may remember the International Decade for Natural Disaster Reduction, IDNDR, a United Nations program. Its original concept was proposed by Frank Press, then President of the U.S. Academy of Sciences, during the opening ceremony of the 8th World Conference held in San Francisco in 1984. This idea evolved into a United Nations resolution in 1987, and the decade program started on January 1, 1990. Current knowledge that could save lives and property is not getting to where it could do the most good. IAEE has been feeling moral responsibility to take an active role in implementing the goals of IDNDR. In Madrid in 1992, at the 10th World Conference, IAEE made an important decision to be more strongly involved with IDNDR by creating the World Seismic Safety Initiative, WSSI, as an IAEA's undertaking. Harish and I co-chaired WSSI, and Bill Ivan was one of the directors. Since WSSI was headquartered at the Nanyang Technological University, NTU in Singapore, Bill, Harish, and I used to meet each other at least once a year at NTU for WSSI's annual directors meeting. In addition, Harish and I visited many countries that are not well prepared for earthquake risk, despite their high seismic hazard. The meeting was named the High Level Meeting, HLM, which was held in Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Kathmandu, Dhaka, Colombo, Yangon, Hanoi, Kampala, that is capital of Uganda, and Ulaanbaatar. Now, I'm going to talk about my research career in earthquake engineering. As I told you, my earlier research interest was focused on the engineering property of strong ground motion. But my research interest gradually changed in the 1970s when I was involved in the earthquake damage estimation of the bridges and waterworks in Tokyo. The word lifeline was not used yet. It was in April 1974 that Professor Martin Duke of the University of California, Los Angeles created the Technical Council on Lifeline Earthquake Engineering, TCLEE, in ASCE. The first issue of the Journal of the Technical Councils of ASCE was published in April 1979. I have a paper, Lifeline Earthquake Engineering in Japan, in that issue with two co-authors. On June 12, 1978, a magnitude 7.4 earthquake occurred off Sendai in the Pacific Ocean. Since the general structural damage was not very heavy, the damage to the city gas system, waterworks, electric power supply, that is lifeline systems, attracted more attention. Because I was then involved in the lifeline damage estimation of Tokyo, I decided to do all out to look into the damage to the lifelines in Sendai and its surrounding area with a total population of about 1 million. Such studies included how was the system being operated at the time of the earthquake, what structural damage was inflicted, what kind of inconveniences were suffered, how long did service interruption continue, and how the damage was repaired. We did the same kind of study for the 1964 Niigata earthquake, although 16 years had already passed since its occurrence. These studies for Sendai and Niigata were the first elaborate studies of the earthquake damage on lifeline systems in Japan. In those days, I was often invited to give lectures on how to mitigate earthquake disasters. On such occasions, I used to talk about how Japanese earthquake-resistant technology had advanced since the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake, and how we were better prepared for earthquake disasters than most of the people in the other part of the world. I strongly believed that Japanese structures were earthquake resistant and that they would not easily collapse. By speaking about Japanese experiences, I thought I was contributing to the advancement of earthquake disaster mitigation in the world. My such illusion was completely shattered on January 17, 1995, when the Kobe earthquake occurred and took more than 6,000 lives. Being faced with a grim reality, I had to give careful thought to my groundless belief. I repeatedly asked myself, why have I made such terrible failures? There seem to be three reasons. There are shortage of knowledge, erroneous self-contentment, and insufficient explanation capability. All of them are within the bounds of earthquake engineering specialists. The Kobe earthquake changed my professional career greatly again. I was asked to take the position of the director of the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention, that is NIED. I stayed there for almost 10 years from 1996 to 2006. While I was there, NID accomplished two major research projects. One was the establishment of the dense seismograph networks uniformly covering all over Japan. Their operation started in June 1996, the year immediately following the Kobe earthquake. A nationwide strong motion seismograph network consists of more than 1,000 observation stations distributed every 20 kilometers uniformly covering Japan. These 1,000 acceleration type seismographs are placed on the ground surface. In addition, there is a network of 700 strong motion seismographs and 700 high sensitivity velocity type seismographs. These two types of seismographs are installed at the bottom of the same borehole, which is at least 200 meters deep. At these 700 stations, strong motion seismographs are also installed on the ground surface to obtain information on the amplification of strong motion in the surface ground layers. This map shows the distribution of seismograph stations. You may at least see that many seismographs are installed covering all over Japan. The data recorded by these networks may be downloaded by any interested party from the NIAED's website. On this website, the animation of the propagation of seismic waves and the change of intensity is also released to the public almost in real time. This shows the animation of the propagation of the peak ground acceleration at the time of the magnitude 9 tsunami earthquake, which occurred on March 11, 2011. In this movie, the ground motion becomes stronger as the color changes from blue to red. The data are shortened to 1/5 of the original time scale. So, this 1 minute animation represents the ground motion propagation of 5 minutes. The other project was the construction of the world's largest high-performance three-dimensional shaking table near Kobe City. The table was named E-Defense, where E means the earth or earthquake. E-Defense has a table size of 20 meter by 15 meter and can shake a real-sized 6-story reinforced concrete building to the breaking point. The major performance is summarized in this table. To make such experiments possible, the table's maximum accelerations are 900 centimeters per second in the horizontal and 1,500 centimeters per second in the vertical direction. The maximum velocities are 200 centimeters per second in the horizontal and 70 centimeters in the vertical direction. And the maximum displacements are plus minus 100 centimeters in the horizontal and plus minus 50 centimeters in the vertical direction. Its construction started in 2000 and was completed in March 2005. E-Defense is used jointly by academic, industrial, and governmental organizations, as well as independently by NIED. More than 100 series of tests have been carried out so far. The results, including the images and detailed data, are open to the public, except for those performed by private enterprises for the product development. I'm going to show you here the video of the dynamic collapse tests of the wooden houses. Two ready-built houses of the same type were placed on the table side by side, and one of them was strengthened. Then they were subjected to a recorded earthquake motion by gradually increasing its intensity. I don't think it necessary to say which one had been strengthened. I retired from NIED in 2006 at the age of 67 years old. Although I still have an interest in earthquake disaster mitigation problems, my career as an active researcher came to the end. This speech today may be the only one in the last 10 years. I used to believe that I had contributed at least something to the advancement of earthquake engineering. I taught at several universities. I served as IAEE's Secretary General for 14 years, and then its president from 2006 to 2010. I was instrumental in forming WSSI to support IAEE's objectives to realize IDMDR goals. I served as the director of the National Research Institute for Earth Science and Disaster Prevention in Tsukuba, Japan. When I look back at my 56 years research life, however, I cannot but feel ashamed of what I have done. I'm afraid if I have been an arrogant professor who has misguided people in the wrong direction, I might have misguided our people by saying that our structures were safe and that our houses would not collapse and endanger our people's lives and property. It may be too late for me, but I would like to say to the younger researchers, observe nature and respect nature sincerely. Nature is much wiser and often much more malicious than you think. Thank you for having patiently listened to the egoistic history of my earthquake engineering research. Thank you very much.